I believe everyone has a divine purpose. It doesn't matter what your environment or early life was like, you matter. And the people who seem to know this better than others are people who have experienced a near-death experience. Today, my guest is Linn Rivers. Linn Rivers is a functional health and wellness expert and educator. She teaches people all over the world how to take their health into their own hands, mind, body, and spirit. Lynn's educational background includes holistic, functional medicine, microbiome therapy, spiritual counseling, Eastern and Western massage therapy, neurolinguistic programming, yoga therapy, life coaching, death doula, hypnosis, and human design analysis. And having near-death experiences was a real important part in the transformation in her life, and she's here to talk about that. Welcome, Linn.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Sure. So I think a lot of people think that their start in life dictates where they end up. So I would really like to start with that. What was your early life like?
Not fun. I started this journey on a pretty tumultuous path. I had pneumonia as a baby when I was 1 and 3, and that really set forth a lot of trauma, emotional trauma and physical trauma. As a baby, you really take on the vibrations of words rather than understanding what words mean. And so when my family would say, I love you, when I'm tied down in incubators, that came out in fear. They're fearful of me dying. So I became afraid of the word love very early on in life. And I lost the majority of my family before I was 15 years old. I continued to have breathing issues and asthma my entire childhood and teenage years. Grew up with an alcoholic father, really dysfunctional family, and just a lot of other trauma, such as endometriosis very early on, and hormonal imbalances in general, suicidal depression. I lost my mom at 15, which, cascaded into a bunch of other emotional issues. And it just carried over into my 20s. I ended up attracting a partner who died of the same cancer that my mom died of, while I was also dying of my organs shutting down at the time from a virus. And so this just progressed. And it was the last near-death experience that I had that really was like the big aha moment. But all of that from childhood, it really took a long time to unpack and to understand why it all happened. But once you have your own near-death experience, it all makes so much sense. And you see it from this perspective of like, oh, that just happened. It was just part of my path.
Okay, so what led up to the first one?
So the first one, as an adult, I should say, because the two when I was a baby, I don't necessarily remember those experiences, but I
Oh,
do know that they set me forth on. I had a lot of psychic abilities very early on. I remember I had prophetic dreams from the age of 3 and on. And so I think that contributed to those, whatever you want to call them, powers, if you will, you know. But as an adult,
hang on,
I,
hang on. Let me.
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, I don't want to skip past that. What was that like growing up with prophetic dreams? That must have been wild. Did you know that other people didn't have that?
No, it felt like it was just a natural part of life. So I just went with it. I never talked to anyone about it. I didn't think anything of it at all.
It wasn't
And
weird.
no, not at all. In fact, it was really beautiful because I had moments, I dated obviously really bad people at certain points in my life. And I was also really toxic at certain points in my life. And I would always dream about what was actually happening in the relationship. Like I would be driving down a road in a dream. There would be signs off to the left that would say, this address at XYZ time. And I would find out that that was exactly where my partner was at that time yeah. And so it was just simple things like that that would really actually help me. Like it was able to be beneficial in my, daily life. And then my mom was able to come through and talk to me in my dreams as a teenager and also give me guidance. She would tell me like, look, this is what's happening and you need to take care of this. And so I always it was a really beautiful gift. And I never thought twice. I never thought to ask anyone, or it was just a matter of fact.
When did
And
you know that it wasn't like something everybody experienced?
I think I probably say when I started getting into the yoga community, when I was probably like 19, 20 years old, when I started my healing journey and realized that people who were like spiritually awakened didn't have these things, right? Like they didn't have this. I was like, oh yeah, I had this dream, this XYZ thing's going to happen. So I just need to be ready for it tomorrow. And they would look at me like, is she serious? Does she really think? And then it would happen, and they're kind of like, how is that happening? And so that for me was kind of the aha moment of, oh, this isn't an everyday occurrence for people. Like, okay. I grew up in a really small town. And so I didn't look outside of that for a very long time. And so I just thought it was normal.
So that it's really interesting because I think a lot of people think if I can just tap into spirit and see what's going to happen, use my tarot cards or talk to spirit, then my life is going to be so much better. But what I'm hearing you say is that it really wasn't for a long time.
Right. And I mean, on that note, it's not about your life being better because you're still going to go through the tribulations, whatever they are. Right. It's just a helping hand that I was given because I was put on a very different path. Like, had I not had certain guidance, there's no way I would have made it out of it. Because a lot of people who go through even a quarter of what I did at that age end up actually killing themselves through suicide or other things, right? Drugs or the whole 9 yards. And so I think it was a protective thing for me. My guides were protecting me. And it was so I didn't have anyone in the physical world to assist me. I was having to do everything by myself. So I had this guidance system where they're like, we need to help her. Otherwise, she's not going to make it through.
Mm.
And, when I had a first near death experience, that's when I was really shown like, hey, you can't come home yet. Like, you have to stay here. And that was the aha moment of, oh, so you guys have been helping me intentionally. Like, you've
Oh,
been keeping me here intentionally. Got it. So,
how did that change things?
so my first as an adult near death experience, it was the biggest moment for me to acknowledge that we create our reality. That so at the same time, my partner was dying from the same colon cancer that my mom died of. And I had to stay and take care of myself. They had to go home and be with their family members to, take care of that situation. And I was again left to my own devices to take care of myself. And I remember crawling to the floor. I was crawling on the floor to try to get water. And it literally took me 10 minutes to get like 5 yards. And I was just aching everywhere. My body was in so much pain. And I finally made it back to my bed. And at the time, my dogs who weren't allowed in my room, they came and they laid right beside me. They knew that something was happening. And I remember just laying there, and all of a sudden, I was like, I'm ready to go. Like, it's okay to let go. And I had the biggest sense of peace wash over me. It was the most beautiful sense of peace that I could ever explain. I think it's like the way that humans look to feel on this life without actually dying. That's what it feels like. And so I let go, and I'm just gone, and I'm in this beautiful white space, and I'm just happy, and I feel free. And all of a sudden, these guides come up to me. They like charge up to me on horses. They're actually Native American spirit guides, which for me was profound on its own because I had always had a really deep connection to Native American culture, to the point where drumming can take me into a trance really quickly. And I always wondered why. And they came to me, and they've been my guides time and time again throughout many lifetimes, apparently. And they stopped me, and they're like, you cannot come, like, you have to stay here, and you have to do XYZ. They told me exactly what I needed to do in order to start getting better. And they said, we're gonna put you back in, but they showed me a few things first, right? And so they showed me Earth and how Earth was looking. And the first one, Earth looked horrible. Like, it was brown and dingy and looked like it was dying. And I looked at them and I said, does that mean that I have to go back? And they said, yes, you can't stay with us. You have to go back. And I was like, okay. And so in that, when I came back, what I realized is that I had been creating my own all of my new situations in life. And that was like this, oh my God, like, I need to pay attention to what I'm creating, what I'm putting out into the world, because that's what I'm getting back. Right. And so it was this really big moment for me to step forward on a whole new path. And everything that I did from that point on became intentional. It became this, who do I want to be in the future? Because I need to start creating that now. Because what I was shown is like the present moment, it's pre-sent, right? The pre-sent moment. And what we are creating right now is what we will see in the next few months, right? We're always creating our next reality. And so it was really just so beautiful for me to come back and be like, oh my God, like, what am I doing in this life? And why am I not staying here? Why do I have one foot out the door? Like I've been trying to escape, whether it was through, pain, emotional pain, or physical pain in my past. And I was like, okay, like I need to learn to be here. And it stuck for a year until I had my next one. And that's where things just like really was like, oh, okay, got it.
So what do you think you needed to have? I mean, it's for somebody to have one, and you've had at least three. So what do you think you needed to have multiple near-death experiences? Not
So it's an interesting way to look at this, because I think I have a really large audience that's starting to come in, and I have a big message, and I had to get to those messages a lot quicker in order to share them at a younger age, right? I'm not going to be in my 60s sharing these things. Like I had to start them sooner in life. And I had a lot of catching up to do. I had to go through all of those trial and errors over and over again to reach the messages that I'm sharing now, right? Like losing all of my family members at this point to some form of illness, and all of the illness that I had to go through and overcome. I had to learn about all of these diseases and what's actually making people sick in this world in order to be able to share it from a really solid foundation. And so I had to go through all of those experiences, and the near-death experiences, I feel, for me, really snapped me into actually evolving into that being. Because I could have just been like, oh, I'm just going to keep doing photography and video, and I'm just going to keep doing all these things, which are great, and I still do, but I wouldn't have been so keen on sharing a message of healing had I not healed myself. Because I'm all about practicing what you preach. And I had to learn all the ins and outs about healing on a human level and spiritual level, and being able to share it at the same time.
So you're a death doula. Was that as a result of the near-death experiences?
No, I thought, because I'm like, I keep attracting all these people who die into my life. Like literally, I'm talking, even when I would have friends who would step into my life and they were more like mother figures to me at some points in my teenage years, they actually ended up dying too very soon after meeting them. And so I was just like, man, like once I unpacked all of the deaths, it's like, maybe I'm just supposed to work with people who are dying. And I thought that was a process, instead of acknowledging that I keep attracting these people because that's what I attached as healthy in my life, right? We go for our comforts. And I got so comfortable with there being people dying in my life that I just kept that energy, just kept repeating itself, right? And so I stepped into death doula for a very short time, thinking like, I'm just supposed to work with this, until actually one of the experiences, the first one that we were just talking about, they're like, you need to live, like you're not living. And so I was attracting dead energy, right? Because that's my stagnation and everyone else's stagnation that had been in my life. And so I was like, oh my God, I need to have fun. I need to enjoy life. I need to, be more lively, and I'll attract more of that into my life. And so that's where it stopped. I was like, okay, that's not for me.
So I agree with we're here to live. One of the first things that I ever did was work as a past life regression facilitator, and I still do. And it's the same theme in everybody's experience, is that something happens and they stop living.
Mhm,
They're still going through the motions, they're still here, but it's like, your heart gets broken and I just give up. I'm just
mhm.
gonna stop. So can you say more about that? Because I think that's a really important thing that people need to hear. What do you mean I need to start living?
Well, that's a twofold question, right? Because there are a lot of people who are just on autopilot.
Yeah.
They don't think twice about what they're doing. They drive to the same job every day, the same route. They don't, pay attention to where they're going. They eat the same things. They're just kind of on this autopilot life. And they're not doing anything to advance themselves. Like learn new things or to grow in other areas or meet new people. They just stick in their little bubble and call that life, right? And the reality is, it's like life is meant to be experienced.
Yeah.
We, play and enjoy, and so try new sports, for example, or looking for new opportunities that you might be in a job where you really don't like, but you're one of those people that say, well, this is the best that I can get. And it's like, no, it's not. Like, we need to push ourselves a little bit more to find the joy in life. And then there are people who, they have a devastating thing happen, they lose a family member, and that's kind of the funny one to me. And I say funny because I can look at all the people who died in my life and I can genuinely laugh at it, because I'm just like, man, they had their own journey, and I just happened to be on the other side of it, where that helped me evolve, right? And they got to go home. I'm not sad for them. Like, there have been moments where I'm like, how dare you leave me here? But it's one of those where they can take that and turn it into, I'm never going to be happy again, instead of realizing that's an opportunity to share that life force for them, right? To take on stuff that they loved doing and learning about it. Like, oh, my partner loved to do pottery. I want to learn about pottery so I could like carry that energy on. Just something so simple that people can really turn that around, right? Instead of seeing it as this really negative thing, it can be seen as, hey, this happens. We're all going to die one day. So I want to live the best life that I can while I'm here. And what does that look like? For every single person, it's going to be something different, right? But to find what that is, what makes you smile, what makes you laugh, what makes you light. Because the biggest thing that we can do in this life to heal others and the world is to emanate our brightest light, to
Okay.
be a beacon for others to raise their vibration, right? Because if you're constantly living in this lower vibrational space and you're always sad and you're hanging on to the past and all these things that happen, that's what you're going to be emanating. And that is, again, what you attract. And so it's this vicious cycle that every time you go out, you're putting that energy out there, and that's not going to be conducive to anyone. Right. And so that's what it means to like really actually take ownership of your existence and to figure out what makes you happy. Go and do that. Because in doing that, you're going to light up so many people around you.
Okay. Oh, I think one of the things that people who have near-death experiences have in common is that they no longer fear death. And death is a gigantic fear for lots of people. So what would you say to those people who have a fear of death?
I mean, it's one of those things that it's the biggest unknown for people, right?
Yeah.
So the chances of you losing that fear are slim to none until you've actually been there, right? And so the best thing that people can do is just to always remember that death can be at any point. It's not just old age, right? Like my top family member, the only one who lived to be old was my grandpa. Everyone else was 50 and under. And I think people have this idea that, oh, I'll do things later in
Yeah.
life, but that's never guaranteed. So I think the way to work through that fear of death is to accept it, to embrace it, and to know like, oh, that's right. I'm not going to be on this planet, for the for hundreds of years. I want to explore it and love it and understand it as best as I can. And I think that's the only thing that can really take that down a notch, is to embrace the fact that you're going to die at some point. And so what do you want to do with the life that you have?
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things where until you're there, you do not know. And the biggest unknowns of lives are always the most difficult to look at. And so instead of trying to get rid of the fear, embracing that fear is where people are really going to be able to live a more fulfilling life.
Well, were your dying experiences the same? Was it all the peace and the love and the surrender?
Absolutely. Oh my God. Yeah, it's the second you get there, it's just like the sense of peace that comes over you. It's just so overwhelming and beautiful. And a lot of people actually have a hard time coming back here. A lot of people really don't want to come back once they're in that space. And there's a reason for it. It's light. You're just a vibrant being, right? Because you don't have the earthly things tying you down anymore. You're no longer attached to your external environment. It's all of a sudden it's just like light and beautiful and peaceful. And I think that's honestly, in my opinion, that's one of the biggest ways that you can tell when people are actually in a near-death experience versus when they're having a psychological experience that's keeping them trapped in their fear still, because that fear dissipates the second that you're releasing, right? And so when you're carrying that fear into an experience still, that to me says like, okay, you're not at the edge yet, because once you're at the edge, that freedom is just there. And I mean, it's countless and numbers of people who've had near-death experiences have had that same reality. And so, yeah, for myself, it was just like, it was easy to want to let go, even though they're like, nope, you can't come. I was like, okay, like, I guess I can go back, but if I didn't have to, I wouldn't.
What's on the other side?
So this is one of the things that really shocked people. Um, it's not black and white. It's not that we all come from a same place. We actually originate from different planets, if you will. I mean, the universe is so vast and there are other beings out there. And it's funny that we talk about aliens and how are we making contact with aliens? And it's like the reality is we are here, right? We are here from other planets. And there, the whole news and all the things in the news these days about, oh, like we made contact, like there are species, and it's like, dude, we've been doing this for so long. You just don't know it because we're in the same suits that you are, and we all come from different places. And I got to go home. I got to see mine. And oddly enough, the place that I'm from, that I originated from, our planet was destroyed, which is why we're here helping Earth to try to prevent the same things from happening to what happened to ours. And when I was taken back twice and shown Earth from the distant perspective, we're actually on spaceships. Like they're literally spaceships that we stay on for the majority of the time. And there are other planets that we're able to stop off on. But when I was able to stop off on one of the planets, it was dark, like it had been destroyed. And there are still beings who are there on a regular basis. And they came up to me and they're like, we're so happy to see you. We miss you. And they're just this love, this deep love. But I got to see that this, like, it's so much more vast than we understand. And not all of us come from the same places. And it actually made a lot of sense in that moment of all the Pleiadians and all of these different beings that we talk about here on Earth. It actually did make sense all of a sudden. I'm like, oh, so this is what they're calling us. They just name us these things, but the reality, we're just beings from other places, right? And the biggest mind-blowing thing that happened for me is after those experiences happened, I was introduced to a movie called Astral City. Have you seen it?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so Astral City is a movie based on the documentary of Chico Xavier, who was one of the first well-known psychics, I think, from Puerto Rico. And he looked like an alien. It's like they put him in a body and they forgot to transform him. People couldn't look him in the eyes because his eyes were so bizarre. He had to wear glasses because people would not like stop staring at him. And he was the first one that started channeling for people. And people were just like, how are you doing this? Like, how did you know my grandma's name? And she, telling him all this stuff. And so they made a documentary about him. And he was channeling these beings from another planet. And they made a movie about the documentary. And I ended up getting to see the movie after my experiences. And where they took this being and did this healing was exactly where I went. It was the same room, the same light that they use. It was the same light. All of the things were exact. I have chills just even still thinking about it, because I was literally in the same place that this guy that he channeled was from. And so it opened me up to like a whole new, like, oh my God, we have zero idea of what's actually happening in this existence, right? We're just a small speck on the radar, literally a tiny dot in this map of this like gigantic universe. And what's actually happening out there is, I mean, it would be dumbfounded to people.
I kind of circle back to the brown earth thing. Can you
Mhm.
say more about that?
Yeah, so the second time that they showed me, it was healing, and so it was better. And that was actually, so COVID was a necessary pause. This was before and after COVID happened, and where the whole world had to shut down because literally the earth itself needed this reset. So we had to stop people from the pollution and all of the constant toxicities of, damaging earth, in order for it to come back to a place where it can actually thrive again. And so it was like this dingy view and this, hey, earth isn't doing good, we need a reset. And then this happened. And they also showed me this is what happens about every 100 years. We have these big pandemics, whatever you want to call them. And it's actually a reset because we can't keep going at the pace that we're going and expecting earth to not get worse, right? Because humans just go, 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 and they're destroying, and earth needs reset. So we come in, we're like, hey, we need to put a pause on people. We need to stop this, and also like clean up energy. Like, I hate to tell people, but it's a cleanup of dead energy on this planet, and the energies that are no longer serving us will be leaving in masses in order for this to continue surviving. Right. And so it even comes back to the further point we were talking about earlier. We're all going to die in some fashion. We're going to die. That's just one of the cleaning techniques that we use in order to keep Earth going.
Well, this is fascinating. I'm so glad that we got to chat because this is it's not a story that's on my radar. I dip into near-death experiences every now and then, but I have not heard anything like this. So I definitely appreciate you sharing with that. And how can people hear more from you?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to go to www.linnrivers.com and LINN rivers.com. And there's, you can get pretty much access to all of my stuff on there right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.